So in 2007, you started a company called Skimlinks in your living room in Sydney, Australia, and you built it into a $50 million per year business with offices across London and New York and San Fran. And eventually you sold the business in 2020, despite COVID and everything happening in the world. That's amazing. That's an incredible journey, which most people can't even imagine going on. Just tell me a little bit about, I suppose, that journey, kind of condense it for me and give me the key learnings.
Well, firstly, it was not actually Skimlinks that I began in 2007. It was Skimbit, which is an even worse name, if that is possible. but it was a social decision-making tool, which it basically is like, in retrospect, it's like a poor man's Pinterest, but it was a platform that I conceived of and had built that was helping people make group decisions, like what villa should we book for our Ibiza holiday, or what television should we buy for our family home. And so I had built it, in my living room in Sydney while I was working full time as well, and I was basically building it on the side for a while, and then decided that Australia was no place to run a tech startup. At the time, there was just nothing going on there. So ended up to cut a very long story short, because it really is quite a long story, but ended up popping over to Europe, mainly to visit my developers in Romania, but also to kind of pop in and see my friends in London, because I had lived in London previously. And while I was there, an opportunity arose to pitch what I had built, Skimbit, to a wedding website as a sort of white label, like to create a white label version of this that this website could use. And the success of that, as a result of that discussion, the wedding website basically paid me a year up front to license this software.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So on the basis of that, I thought, okay, I guess I better move back to London. So ended up packing my bags, moving back to London, and became, a penniless startup entrepreneur in my 30s. And so spent the next year trying to get a second client and venture funding. But of course, now it's 2008 and the world is starting to slide into recession. And while we were trying to figure out the revenue model for Skimbit, we came up with this way of making money on our own website, which involved automatically turning all the user-generated product links into affiliate links. And so that's if someone clicked on that affiliate link, we would get a commission. And in building that out and pitching that to potential clients and to potential investors, I realized that it was this weird way of making money that was the most exciting bit of what we had built. So in a moment of inspiration, I dumped everything that we'd built in the last 2 years and just focused on commercializing this monetization technology so that other websites could use it. And that's how Skimlinks was born. Still a terrible name. But it made sense because it was Skimlinks, Skimbit. Anyway, so that was now then, 2008. And then over the next, 11 years, we built it to be quite a big business. It was hard because it involved not just, building a product and selling it, but also educating a market, because we were selling to media companies and, big publishers that had really never thought about affiliate marketing as a way of making money before. So we had to educate them on what affiliate marketing is, how they could set up their whole org structure to create content that would be optimized for affiliate marketing, and then selling into them. But we were good at it, and over the next 11 years, we were basically working with all the major publishers and media companies out there. And I chose to step down at, when was it, 2018? Basically, it had been 11 years. I'd been running it, and I was really proud of what I'd gotten us to. But we were now at the stage where we knew that the only way that we would get a good exit is if we focused on EBITDA maximization. And I could do it, but it just wasn't going to be my strength. So I asked my chief revenue officer to step up and take over the reins. He did. And then I stayed on the board until we got acquired, in the middle of the pandemic lockdown.
Cool. That's amazing, right? Like starting a company and maximizing EBITDA are two completely different skills, right?
They are,
I get that. And I spent some time in Sydney. I lived in New Zealand for 3 years. So I understand that that part of the world, the tech ecosystem, is just not what it is compared to San Fran or London, right? So we welcome you to those
I
London
think a lot
to build
has changed now, though.
Definitely.
Really, in the last 15 years, I think Australia has had some really big success stories with Canva.
Cool. All right. So you've been on that amazing journey building that cool company, and obviously you've got your new business now, which we'll talk about in a moment. But for people that want to go on that journey and start something in their living room and build it into a $50 million revenue business, what advice would you give to startup founders that maybe have an idea, they want to get going? What tips would you give to want to be entrepreneurs?
Consider it again. Because it's really, I think there's a lot of glamorization of what it is to be a founder. They're sort of the new rock stars. They're the ones that now date the supermodels and, get invited to all the cool parties. And I think it's been sort of painted up to be something that's super fabulous. But the truth of it is it's really bloody hard. And it takes a huge investments and sacrifice. And I think I've seen a lot of people go into it thinking it's going to be this fabulous, cool thing and get overwhelmed by how stressful it is, how hard it is, how underpaid it is. If you're doing it, like if you want to make money, there's much better ways of making money than starting a company. I think executives at big companies make a lot more money over time on average than a startup founder will if you bake in the odds of making it.
Yeah.
So if you still want to do it because you're just so drawn to the joy of creating something, and the next thing I think you need to look at is, do I have the skills? I think there are a lot of founders that come out of university or even skip university entirely and still make successful founders. But I do think, and perhaps it comes with my own bias, but it helps if you've been exposed to some of the skills that it takes. So I think working for an early stage startup for a few years and getting exposed to what it means. What does, what are the metrics that matter? How do you deal with the stress? How do you run a team? How do you create a culture? These are all things that are really, really necessary to be a successful founder, which oftentimes are not something that comes intuitively. It comes from learning, observing, experiencing it yourself. Especially the team management side. I think coming up with good software and working out how to, build great software is, weirdly not the hard bits. The hard bit is, how do you attract talent? How do you keep them motivated? How do you deal with, communication challenges and, the hurdles that inevitably happen? How do you keep your own stamina up and your teams without losing yourself in the process? Like, these are the hard things that you need to be aware of and be prepared for, but I think come easier if you observe how other people go through that and learn through osmosis.
Yeah. And I love the honesty of the answer there because, 99% of small businesses probably don't make it and don't succeed and don't become what Skimlinks became, right? So it's important to be honest with people.
And you're only interviewing the 1% that kind of made it.
That's true. Yeah.
And if you talk to, and I speak to a lot of, founder friends that have had failures, and, it takes a toll. And, oftentimes they won't go back into starting a company. They'll go into coaching or consulting or take, a well-paid job. And their startup experience becomes something that has taught them resilience and skills that become then very coveted by companies that hire them. But the truth is that, a lot of companies don't work through no fault of their own. Sometimes it's just not the right time, or, the circumstances are not quite in their favor, or a global pandemic hits. And I think it's, I don't think it should stop someone. And I think the entire VC and investor ecosystem relies on selling this picture. Like, they've got a great content marketing machine going on, the VC industry, which is glamorize and make it look fabulous and a great way to make money, because you want deal flow and to pick the best, and they're the ones that you invest. But what they don't say is there's, a trail of detritus behind them, is that the right word? That is made of the broken dreams of people that, have exhausted themselves in the process. I sound very negative. It is also fantastic, and I love it, and I would never have done anything else, but I don't think it's for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. You did the ultimate goal for a lot of people. You were able to have a successful exit. What advice would you give to people that perhaps are a little bit later on in their journey and they have an asset, they're thinking about perhaps somebody acquiring that? How would they go about that process? What tips would you give on, having a successful acquisition?
So there are some exits that happen because someone approaches you out of the blue and gives you a huge sum of money. That's very rare. The majority of acquisitions come about as a result of another company that you've been doing business with in some way. They've been a partner or a customer in some way for a period of time. They've built a relationship with you. They know your team, they know your product, and they've worked out that then there's something there, and then those are the deals that then go on to become something, more often than not. So for anyone that has a company and does think that they want to sell in the next few years, you start now. What I did is I mapped out the ecosystem of potential acquirers, understood what each of their motivations might be to buy us, and then you go and invest in building those relationships and creating a vision of what a world where you are part of their company would look like. So it's a lot of storytelling, it's a lot of relationship building, it's a lot of just patience and demonstrating that you are the kind of person and company that they would want in their fold. And I don't know the stats, but I'm sure it's something like 9 out of 10 acquisitions will come about as a result of an existing relationship that very naturally evolves into an acquisition.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not what you see on Dragon's Den most of the time, is it?
Well, that's only just usually investment. That's not the exit. The exits are hard to achieve. They are, because unless you're very, very profitable and can thus sort of, buying you then becomes a purely mathematical exercise of what your revenue multiple or profit multiple would be. In all other cases, to take on a loss-making entity, which most startups are, you have to have extreme strategic importance to them. And that is not something that's always immediately understood. And actually, most of these decisions are still made very emotionally, which means they have to like you. Yeah. And you as a founder and the company as a whole needs to have, I guess, a kind of aura around it that has an intangible quality to it. And that, you have to be aware of that and realize that acquisitions are very rarely, again, purely mathematical decisions. There's an emotional element to it. So they have to fall in love with you and your company to get the best valuation.